Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. We're going to get started in just a second here. I'm going to get my screen set up for you. Perfect. It looks good to me. If you guys can see my slides or are having any trouble seeing the slides, let me know. Thank you, Mike. Mike tells me it looks good. It's good to see you, Mike, by the way. Apparently he can hear me too, so that's a good sign. Great. Well, thank you all for being here. My name is Paul Merrill. I'm with Beaufort Fairmont Test Automation Services, and we focus on test automation. We're based in Cary, North Carolina. We love working with companies to get them started with test automation, to help them overcome challenges with test automation, and to help them figure out why they're not getting as much as they think they should get out of test automation. We do that for a bunch of companies around the US. We've had about 40 clients in the last 4 years, which is fun. We're a small company, we're growing. And today I'll tell you a little bit about that growth and things that we're looking for from you potentially. So once again, glad everybody's here. It's a cold day in Cary, North Carolina. I hope it's not too cold where you are, but it's certainly not as cold as where Nancy is up in Canada. So we'll hear from her in just a minute. Today, we're going to talk qualitative risk-based test reporting, and Nancy is going to fill us in on this. I believe I've heard this talk before. I believe she did it at a keynote at STPCon, and I liked it. I thought it was really cool. Nancy's a cool person anyway. I'm sure you'll get something out of this just like I have in the past. Nancy's Twitter address is here. Nancy Kelln in Kelln is down there. You can read that on the slide there. Let's get started. I want to talk a little bit about things that are upcoming. So on the 16th, I will be doing a meetup in Durham. It's the TISCA meetup, which is a group that I'm a part of. TISCA is the Triangle Software Quality Association. We call this area of the country the Triangle, the Research Triangle. So that's what that means. It starts at 6 p.m. There will be food. And what I'm going to be doing there is actually working on my first keynote. So hopefully I can get it ready by then. But come out, see it, give me some thumbs up, thumbs down feedback on that if you're in the area. Would love to have you there. I'll be testing out my first keynote, so would love to get some feedback. The 21st of January, we'll have Brendan Conley on. I love Brendan. He's always got great ways of looking at test automation. I'm looking forward to that at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the 21st of January. If you haven't heard already, the same group I talked about before, the Triangle Software Quality Association, otherwise known as TISCA, will have our biennial conference, the 26th and 27th of February of 2020. It's in Durham, North Carolina. The price is outstanding. And for what you get, you're going to be blown away. So the conference day is $149. You can add on workshops for the previous day, which is the 26th as well. Tickets are selling very well, and we're excited about it. We had over 500 people a couple years ago. We have some really great speakers there. I'll be speaking there. We have Angie Jones as the keynote. We have Lisa Crispin coming in. Ashley Hunsberger is a local. Mike Lyles will be speaking. Tons of people from all over, and we're really excited about the speakers. The schedule will be posted in the next day or two here. Don't wait though, because tickets are selling fast. I mentioned my first keynote. That's going to be at STPCon in March. It's actually the day of it will be the 1st of April. So I'll see if I can work in a little April Fool's joke there as well for everybody. But looking forward to that in San Diego. If you're in that area, make sure to come out to STPCon. It's a great conference. I love it. It's the place where I met Nancy for the first time. They always have great speakers, always strong content, and I always learn a lot at that conference. So you all may know about the B list, the Beaufort Fairmont list. These are a few people that I just want to thank for the last month. They've done things for me or for Beaufort Fairmont, and I just like to take a little bit of time to sit down and think about people who have done good things for us. So if you see a name on there that looks a lot like yours, it probably is yours. Thank you for everything that you've done, and I look forward to doing more things with you in the future. Some of those names are just people who retweet things or who share things on LinkedIn that we've posted as a company or me personally. So thank you for what you've done. Others are people who are close friends and are supporters. So congratulations if you made the B list. A couple of things. We're looking for some folks. I need an automation engineer, I prefer people in North Carolina, Colorado, Illinois, or Iowa. It's a 1 or more year contract to hire. And we need somebody who's automation first minded. So someone who thinks about automating first, someone who sees a problem and they think, how can I automate that to make people's lives easier, to make things faster? That's the idea that we're going for here. Take a look at this. You can find it on our website, beaufortfairmont.com/automation-engineer. Take a picture real quick or ask me for that link later. I'm happy to provide it for you. A few other things I'm going to be looking for in the next quarter. I'd like someone to help out with recruiting, account manager, sales, consultant, SDET, or evangelist, something along those lines, maybe 2 or 3 of those pieces together. And we also need a consultant with robot framework. I'm looking for that. So if you are specialized in robot framework, even if you haven't done consulting before, that would be helpful to me. We need someone to help out a client. And there's a lot of working with the client and helping them to learn what they need to learn with that role. I haven't got these completely detailed here because I had so many of them I wanted to get out there. If you're interested in one of these, or you know someone who should be interested or it could be interested, make sure that they contact me, paul@beaufortfairmont.com. A couple other things real quick. You guys know by now there's a $50 Amazon gift card giveaway along with this webinar. All you have to do, stick around until the end to see if you won. And with that, I'm going to introduce Nancy. So Nancy is a passionate exploratory test manager with 18 years of diverse IT experience. Nancy enjoys working with teams that are implementing or enhancing their testing practices and provides adaptive testing approaches to exploratory, context-driven, and traditional testing teams. She has coached test teams in various environments and facilitated numerous local and international workshops and presentations. From small scale to multi-million-dollar projects, Nancy has played many roles within testing, including project test manager, test lead, and tester. Her most recent work has been exclusively with exploratory testing implementations at large-scale companies. So, as I bring her off of mute, Nancy, how are you doing today? Thanks for being here.
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. And I'm going to pass the ball over to you here in just a second, and we'll get started.
Okay.
How's the weather up in Canada right now?
We're having a Chinook right now, which is where the warm air from the ocean comes over the mountains and warms us up quite a bit. So it's not as cold as it would be normally.
And what does that mean? That it's positive degrees Fahrenheit today?
Yeah, it's above 0, just barely. There's still snow, so my grass is covered in snow, but my walks are clean, mostly because I shoveled them. But yeah, It's not too bad.
Great, great. Well, thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to hearing your presentation. If you have any troubles, I'm here. Let me know.
Yeah. Can you see my screen okay?
I'm looking for it. I have my screen on full screen. Yes, I can. It looks great. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So welcome, everyone. What an exciting way to spend the week before Christmas. I'm definitely not ready. That's on my list to do tonight, but we're not here to talk about Christmas. We're here to talk about test reporting. So when we test software, a lot of times we try to give metrics, right? And I see when we give metrics and reports, we're trying to really quantify the quality. Because what we do when we test is say, what's the quality the software has? How good is it? How well is it working? So we give numbers and reports to do that. So we're going to dig a bit deep on some pretty basic terms that everyone on the call should know, but I want you to look at them in a bit different way than you're probably used to looking. So the first one, let's talk about quality. And there's been lots of Twitter debate on what is quality, how does it work in our role? It's really subjective, and I think that's why so many people debate it, try to define it, talk about it so much. And even test teams are hired to ensure quality, especially if you're called a quality assurance analyst. There's been lots of debate on that title. We're hired to assure quality, but we also are starting to extend that quality to dev teams, the test teams, our business people, right? We're trying to put more ownership around quality, but it still falls on the test team to try to quantify that and give numbers. So how do we assure it? And when I thought about this one, when building the presentation, I thought, what are some of the things that we make? What are the outputs of testing? We do stuff, but what do we show people and give people? Well, the first thing, before we even really start testing, we have a test plan. What are we going to test? How, when, who? Answer all those questions. We might then make test cases or even high-level scenarios. They could be really detailed, they could be more high-level, but we come up with an idea of when we get the software, what are we going to do with it? And then we produce those metrics, which is what this talk is about. What metrics are we producing? Which ones should we be producing? And we give these outputs, so the test plan, we may have a meeting and walk people through, we may have them review the test cases, we give them the metrics and we say, here you go, Mr. Stakeholder, here's my outputs. Do you think this is of good quality? And that's a tough question to ask. So I wanted to kind of wonder, what metrics do you guys use? And I know Paul's got a couple of poll questions, so maybe Paul, do we want to launch the first one here? It's not about metrics, but I'm curious as to what role people are in and if they're asked for metrics.
Yeah, let's do it. So let's ask folks what their poll is. Take a minute and choose your role here.
So I'm often curious when I'm doing this talk, what are the people in the room or online? What kind of role do they have? There's a few others, yeah.
We've got a lot of folks voting. We've got an active group today, so 88% voting. I'm going to close the poll and share that with everyone. Okay. So the results look like this, Nancy. Hopefully you can see that. It looks like 38% testers.
Yeah. So a third, pretty close with a few majority of testers, managers, and then some automation. And I'm going to try and work automation in here as well, just speak to it with metrics too, because I knew we'd have a few people here. So it looks good. So then let's ask the next one too, around if they're asked for metrics, because my big assumption was everybody is asked for metrics. But are you really? Did I assume wrong? And I try not to assume. Oh,
they're voting now.
I assume a bit wrong. Yeah, we have some people that aren't asked. That's interesting.
So let me share the results here.
Yeah, so a third again, with some majority not being asked. Interesting. So my next question, if this was the room, would say, well, are you now being asked or do you not need to be asked? So, very curious. Well, hopefully if you're not asked, you can use some of this content. And if you aren't giving them, but need to start, maybe this content will be relevant too. So for those that are asked, especially the strongly agree group, what metrics do you use? And if you want, you can type it in the chat and I'll see if I can watch that. But there's a bunch that I know that we get used or asked to produce as well. So if we talk just test cases, we get asked how many test cases do we have and how many have passed and how many have failed and how many have blocked. Then when we test, we of course raise defects. So how many defects do people have? How many did you find? How many did we agree were actual defects? How many did we say weren't? How many did we defer? How many critical ones did we have? We also talk about potentially how much time did we spend testing? How much did we plan to spend? How many bugs did we find in production? And we get all these numbers and we gather all these information pieces and present them. And we say to our stakeholders, here, use these metrics to determine the quality. And I often wonder, how do they do that? How do they know which numbers are good, which numbers are bad? And it's funny because in one big project I was on, we were finding quite a few defects a day, and I went in one day and it was not a bad day for testing. And I said to the room, and it was all directors and VPs, I said, you know, we found 35 defects today in testing. And the one guy leaned back in his chair quite relaxed and said, that's not too bad. And the other guy almost came across the table at me and said, what do you mean 35? That's ridiculous. This is terrible. And it was interesting because it's the same number and they had the same role. But one person was quite calm with that number and one person was quite excited. So for one, the quality was okay. The other, the quality was terrible. Same number. So it's hard to do that with just numbers. So like I said, we're going to break down some stuff. So let's break down another aspect of testing. We talked about quality. Let's talk about this aspect of testing. Everyone should recognize this if you've been in testing for more than a year for sure. A simple test case. So this one is talking about making text bold in Microsoft Word, and it was the easiest screenshot that I could find in the format that I wanted when I was looking on the web. So there's no reason other than that I picked this one. And of course, we've got our steps and the instructions and our expected and actual results and any comments that we're putting in here. But what's interesting is if we really break this down, what I want you to focus on is the expected result. And if we make a test case really simple, what is this expected result? It's just an expectation. It's an expectation that someone has for how the software will react given a certain condition. So if I do this, I expect that will happen. And it may not be the expectation of the tester, because if someone else has written the test case, that person that wrote the test case had an expectation. The person that wrote the test case based that expectation on what they think the business or the end user will want, which they may or may not talk to. So we don't know that they've captured the expectation properly. And then as the tester running it, we're going to evaluate how we understand their expectation and see if the software meets what we think that expectation is. So sometimes we can get that wrong, especially if it's complicated software. But simply, it's just an expectation. So if a test case, just an expectation. Oh yeah, this was the talk about if it's written by someone else. I jumped ahead of myself there. So let's make it even more simple and use some other less tester language. So if we've got a test case as an expectation, a pass, when we say, yes, this test case passes, we're simply saying, yeah, my expectation was met. So a fail, being the opposite of a pass, would be, my expectation is not met. I clicked the button, it's supposed to turn blue, it turned red. Not met expectation. And so we start to count these expectations, right? We're just counting a test case. Test case is an expectation. We're counting expectations. And in this result, I had 10 expectations, 8 were met, 2 were not met. And I give this to my stakeholders and I say, here's the results of my expectations. Do you think we have good quality? And again, kind of hard to decide. What exactly expectations are in the past section? What are in the failed section? Lots of questions here. So then we give them more information. So we say, how about some defects too? So if we fail a test case, we log a defect. A defect is simply a documentation of an unmet expectation. We're just writing down why our expectation wasn't met. And it's funny because we'll even write in there, expected result is this, actual result is that. Here's the gap in what my expectation was, what I ended up getting. And we like to categorize these, we like to prioritize them, we track them until we're closed, we build graphs, we give these reports out to people. So when I was on a big project and realized this wasn't working, and it's the same project where I said 35 and one guy was happy and one guy was mad, I kept reporting that we were passing. We had 90% pass rate. And what was funny is that most of our test cases were written the same way. So they would say they had 10 steps, and the first 9 steps would say, do this, then do that, then do this, then do that, then do this, then do that. And the very last one said, did it work? So all my testers are going, do this, yep, pass, I did that. Do this, yep, pass, I did that. Did it work? Nope, fail. And I had 90% passing. And if you do the math, if I've got 10 test cases that have 10 steps and 9 of them pass and 1 of them fails, and I have 10% pass, and the question at the end was, did the whole thing work? Basically, nothing was working. But I was reporting a good number, but everyone in the project was saying, this is so bad, nothing is working, which was the case. So we couldn't trust our numbers on this project. And I thought, this reporting isn't working. I'm not getting my point across. So I knew this was a problem, and I tried to think about how can I show this to people of how crazy these metrics can be. So I thought, well, I need to put this to a real life application. Where can I take test metrics and put them on a real life application to show that this is kind of crazy? And I finally found one that'll work. So I think everyone knows what TripAdvisor is, right? If you want to go out for dinner or you want to spend a night in a hotel, you want to see how are hotels ranked in this city that I'm going to, because maybe you don't know. Maybe it's a new restaurant and you've heard great reviews. So we use TripAdvisor and sites like Google reviews, Yahoo, Yelp, all those different places to say, let me see what other people's experiences were so I can decide what I want to do, where I want to go, where I want to eat, where I'm going to stay. And it's basically a platform to gather all that information. And what the authors are sharing are whether their expectations were met or not, which is what we're sharing when we test, were the tester's expectations met or not. So I decided to take a TripAdvisor review and write it as a test results report. So Paul mentioned I live in Canada and I'm in Alberta, which has the most beautiful set of Rocky Mountains. They're not the same as the Rocky Mountains that extend into the States. They're amazing. And to spend a night in a hotel in Banff is very expensive. So I've picked two of the priciest hotels from TripAdvisor, the Rimrock Hotel on the left and the Fairmont Banff Springs on the right, which is not owned by Paul and his company. We had a bit of a laugh this morning when I gave him the poll questions because he said, this one's called Fairmont. Is that a coincidence? It absolutely is. They're both beautiful. They're about $800 a night Canadian for the cheapest room. So I want to read reviews before I go to make sure I'm spending my money, because it's going to cost a lot, on the right hotel. So I sent two testers there. The first tester, Joe Tester, I sent and I said, I want you to have, you're going to have some expectations. I want you to tell me how many were met and how many weren't. So Joe spent the night. He had 10 expectations, 8 were met and 2 weren't. And I said, give me a report, because I'm going to present this at the webinar so people can decide which room they want to stay in. And he said, okay, here's a report, 80% pass, 20% fail. So I sent Sally and I said, Sally, I want you to stay at the Fairmont Banff Springs. She had 10 expectations as well. And she said, well, 8 were met and 2 weren't. And she gave me a graph. And I said, great. Now I can decide which hotel I'm going to stay at. And when I was talking to Paul this morning, I said, hey, if these guys get it right, if they pick the right hotel at this poll that we're going to do just now, can you give them a free night stay? And he said, no, but I still want to get you guys to take the poll and see which one you're going to stay at. No free night stay, but let's pretend that if you pick the right one, you'll get a free night stay. So go ahead and stay in do the poll and tell me, which one are you going to stay in? The Rimrock or the Fairmont? So a bunch of people are saying, I don't know, because it's exactly the same. And when I do this at conferences, people pick the Fairmont. And today I was wondering, I wonder if they're going to pick the Fairmont again. And then I decided to think about that more and go, I wonder why. And I think what people are doing is they're looking at this right here. Fairmont is ranked number 2 of 33 hotels in Banff, and the Rimrock is number 3. So the only indication I have is that the Fairmont's ranked a little bit higher. And I think that's what people are leaning on when they pick that one, to go, everything's the same except for that, because we're testers, right? We're always looking for where it's different. But we don't know how TripAdvisor calculates that number. Maybe the Fairmont is higher because it has more reviews, because their star rating is exactly the same too, right? So it's a tough one. We really can't tell. And what's funny is I told you if I could, I'd give you a free night. And the majority you said, I don't know, even when there was absolutely no cost to you. You could have flipped a coin and picked one. And this is the metrics we give our stakeholders on multi-million-dollar projects. I want you to decide the quality of this project, if you're going to ship or not, if you're going to commit to putting this into production or not, based on metrics like this. And we found it hard to pick a hotel room that was at the most, if we have to pay, or the cheapest, $850. So it's funny to me. This is what we give for multi-million project decisions. And we can't even pick a hotel room for a night? And I told these testers, I said, I can't make a decision, guys. I don't think the people in the call will make the decision either. Can you give me more metrics? Because we don't know which hotel has higher quality. And they said, Nancy, absolutely we can. And I told them maybe what we need is entrance and exit criteria. And we do this on our projects, right? We say, what are some numbers that we can put here that'll help us decide if it's quality or not? So if it's above the number, it's quality. If it's below, it's not. And we'll make up numbers like no more than 10% tests failed, no priority 1 defects, just random, what we think we feel okay with, which should help. So I said, okay, let's bring back the reviews, bring back your final test reports, give me more information. So they said, okay, we'll give you our defect metrics. And interestingly enough, Their defect metrics are the same. They each had some P1s, some P2s, mostly P2s, a few P3s. I may ask some questions around, well, you only had 2 unmet expectations, but you've given me 4 defects. Why, right? Maybe we'll have some conversation, but I still don't know. I don't know which hotel, even with the defect metrics, I still don't know. So how do we decide? Well, when you go to TripAdvisor, if TripAdvisor was to change tomorrow and go, you know what, we've got these testers, they produce numbers and graphs and all these things, we should take off the reviews and just put graphs and numbers. I bet you people would stop going to TripAdvisor. We don't go there for the numbers. We go there for the stories. We want to read people's reviews. And you'll notice that probably the next time you're on a website reading reviews, if somebody just gave 5 stars or 2 stars, you want to know why. You gave it 2 stars. You didn't say why. You just gave a star ranking. There's no content here. You really don't put much weight in that review. You kind of just scroll past. You're looking for the reviews, positive or negative, that have the story. We want to know what someone's experience was when they went to that hotel, when they had dinner, because we want to know, is that the experience I want to have? And if it is, that review has more weight. If I'm going to a steakhouse and I read a review from a vegetarian who complained about there not being very many vegetarian items on the menu, probably not going to put a lot of weight on that, because if I'm going to a steakhouse, I want steak for dinner. I want to read about people's steak, how well it was cooked, whether it was good. That's what I'm looking for. And I find that in the stories. So let's send Joe and Sally back and say, we want a different report, guys. That didn't work for us. We couldn't decide. So I said, tell me a story. What was your experience? So here's what Joe wrote. He said, I checked into the hotel. The front desk staff was great. They were polite. They helped me out. I went to my room and it was clean and there were lots of towels. And then I opened the windows and wow, the view was just breathtaking. The bed was a bit firmer than I'd liked. So maybe that's one of his P2 defects or even the P3. He had lots of towels, but they were thinner than what he would have liked. He's kind of disappointed about that. So maybe that's one of his P1s. He's also disappointed about the shampoo and lotion that was in the room. You know, this is a really expensive hotel and he thought he would have had better brand name products. So overall, again, great stay. And there's his metrics, 10, 8, 2. Okay, great. So I know if I really care about thick towels or brand name shampoo products, that may not be I may be also not happy with that experience. But if I don't care about that stuff, Joe's review probably reads great. He had a great experience. His room's clean. Seems like he was pretty happy. So what about Sally? So Sally went to the Banff Springs and what a disappointment. Her room wasn't ready. The staff weren't really helpful. In fact, some of them were rude. It took her, finally she gets a room and it was dirty. So the housekeeping had to come back and it took 4 hours to get checked in from the point she got there to the point that her room was finally clean. And the staff just didn't seem to care. They were rude. Overall, the stay at the hotel wasn't really great, but the town was perfect. The views from the hotel were amazing. She had lots of fun doing hiking and biking and skiing and everything that you can do in Banff. And she's probably going to go back, but she'll pick a different hotel. Wow, what a different experience. So now which hotel are you going to stay in? So if you want to run the next poll, right? Nobody wants to sit for 4 hours waiting for their room and go and see that it's dirty. And maybe Sally's experience was just a bit off that day. Maybe they had a bunch of staff out sick. There's lots of reasons that that could have happened. And you'd probably read more reviews, and Paul's sharing the poll, I think, and most people picked the Rimrock, right? It's pretty obvious. Maybe you'll read other reviews and go, you know what? It's my dream to stay at the Fairmont Banff Hotel because it's historical, it's old, you know, that's just, even if Sally had a bad experience, I really want to stay there. You'll read other reviews and see overall, was Sally's a one-off? What were other people's stories? Is everybody experiencing what Sally had? Right, you get more information. You can make a much better decision. So why don't we do this in testing? Right? Why don't we do this in testing? And when I've asked testers and said, why don't we do this? It gives us so much more information. They say, well, we've always just given numbers, or that's what my people expect. And when I dig deeper into that, right, well, just because we always do something some way doesn't mean we should keep going. What I hear is that they don't know how. They've never been shown how to tell a story. And it comes easily. No one shows us how to write a review on TripAdvisor. We just know. So we have the skills to be able to do it. We just don't know how to take those skills and apply it to testing. What format do we use? What does that look like? So I've got some examples because I tell stories in testing. And it's simply what's called a low-tech testing dashboard. And if you've taken rapid software testing, or some of the other testers are talking about this too, it's not a concept I invented, that's for sure, but lots of people are starting to use this. And basically, this one talks about testing the Notepad application. So WordPad, Notepad, Word, any sort of Microsoft or word processing tool. It doesn't have to be Microsoft. So you have these different columns that start to tell your testing story, right? I'm not going to just write a bunch of paragraphs because that's not going to work so well. It works well for reviews, but not so much here. So how do I do something similar? So I break it down on the left here under focus area into how can you break apart your application? So in Notepad, I simply just went from what the functionality is. I can start a new document. I can save what I'm working on. I can save as to rename it. I can edit, print, format, view, open. I can do all these different things. And that's what I'm going to focus on. So when you start to build this for your application or your project, think about what are areas my stakeholders care about? Who's getting this report? What do they talk about when they're talking about my software? Are they talking about if it's an airline software, booking flights, checking prices, actually paying for flights, signing into a profile, doing check-in online, right? Those are different suggestions for focus areas. So you can probably think of your application and go, oh, here's how I'd break it down. Automation, you might break it down into what different areas you're automating, the types of tests, it can be different things. Then your test progress is how far along are you? So have you started? The words basically say, have we started or not? So these ones are not started, these ones are in progress, this one's blocked. You might say testing is completed or finished or stopped or done, whatever word you want to use for that. The color tells you if we're on track. So based on where we think we should be today with our plan, are we meeting that? Are we behind? Are we ahead of schedule? And we're going to track that too with the color. So the red means that we're working, but we're behind where we wanted to be. Where the green in progress means we're working and we're on track for the schedule. The next two columns, planned intensity and achieved intensity, work hand in hand. The planned intensity is how much effort, time, resources, how much work am I going to put into this area? And I rate it low, medium, high. Low being more of, you know what, we're going to look at it briefly, cover the most important stuff for the business, do a smoke test, maybe a tiny bit more, not really spend a lot of time, effort, energy, not really dig deep into the section. Where a high is the opposite end of that scale. And it's more of a spectrum than a really box you can put things in. So a high would be, we are going to spend as much time and as much energy in there as we can. We're going to beat the crap out of this area. We're going to test everything we can think of, including the craziest things, the things we hear that our developers say, no one would ever do that. We're going to do that all the time. That would be a high. And a medium is, well, I'm not going to go crazy on a high. I'm going to do more than a low. I'm going to be in the medium range. So that's what we talk about when we say, how much do we want to do? And we might take that to our business stakeholders too and say, guys, here's how the team is going to spend their time and energy and effort. A lot in the new and then medium across the board on the rest. And maybe there's some that are even low. And my business might say, you know what, don't worry about format and view, mark those a low, don't spend a lot of time there. So I get them to start guiding where should the test team focus on with this release. And then we report as we go, what's the achieved intensity? How far along are we in doing exactly that? So we're at a medium in this area, we're at a low in this area, these ones we haven't started. The test confidence is the story. This is where we start to get that. And I ask my testers, the people who are hands on keyboards looking at that area, what's your confidence? How do you feel about this piece of software and this functionality within that software? And some people go, is that just a gut check? Yeah, oftentimes it is. And when people struggle with that, you know, and going with a gut check, I can put it in a more, like with words, that's more than a gut check. So I'll say to someone, you know, if we were to launch the new functionality in the way it is with what you've seen tomorrow, how do you feel about that? Are you going, yeah, we could totally turn this on in production tomorrow. Not really worried about it. We've had some defects, but it's looking pretty good now. We could totally turn this on tomorrow. I wouldn't be concerned. Or if I ask that question, if we turn this on tomorrow, what do you think? And they go, oh my God, are you kidding? There's no way we could turn that on tomorrow. We would run the company into the ground. Okay, it's probably a low confidence. And if they go, we could, I don't know, I'd want someone watching it, and I'd be nervous, maybe that's a medium, right? So that's what this is. If we were to turn it on tomorrow, how do you feel about that? And it is a feeling, right? And then I can start to tell the story. Why do you feel that way? What's your concern? What are we worried about? That's what we have to capture in the comments. So we had earlier defects, that's why we're behind, but we're testing well, it's going good, the testers are feeling pretty good now. This area, we've got a P1, we're worried. Well, if it's a P1 and it's a showstopper, should that maybe be a low confidence, not a medium, right? A low being very little confidence. And what's the story there? Why are you ranking it medium? I show this to my stakeholders because I want to drive conversation, and that's how the story comes out. I'm not writing them a paragraph. I show them this, I walk them through it, and they start to ask me questions about it, which takes an engaged stakeholder group. So if you don't have that, it's harder to implement this, but not impossible. And people have said, well, how do we do that in other areas? And I started to kind of, share my screen in this case so we can do some edits. And if anyone has questions, there's only a couple slides left, so you can start putting those in there now in the chat while we have this, because Paul will sort them out while I continue talking here. We can start to break this down into focus areas. So if I've got an application and maybe we're doing some performance testing and we're doing load and stress and volume, and I've got a functional area of a few areas, and I've got data migration and reporting, I can report like that. Maybe it's all functional areas with sub areas. So when I was doing a big SAP project, we put all the different SAP modules in this focus area because it's all functional, and then sub focus areas around that. So if it was finance, there was accounts receivable, accounts payable, journal entries. Start to break it down. And what's great about this is I can roll it up and down however I want. Maybe within performance testing, there's different types of load and stress and volume. So this now becomes the performance testing low tech dashboard, which I can spell, I just can't type. And we start to break it down across the board. So this would be the focus area of load and the sub, and this would be the focus area of stress and the sub areas under that, right? And I'd have another slide that would be my functional one, and I would have the various functional areas and sub areas. I've built these where there could be one slide, a couple slides, just lots of different things, right? Because it's flexible that way. I can flex up and down. And again, I'm asking the same questions. How are we going? What's our planned and achieved intensity? What are my testers' confidence levels? So why is this important? Well, it's tough to manage quality in ones and zeros. And I think if we could, we would have replaced automation or testers with automation, because we can run it and it gives us great information and it tells us lots of stuff, but we still need someone to understand that. We still need someone to interpret it. We need someone to tell the story, to be the voice behind that. And it's a conversation. I really believe quality is a conversation. We need to understand what's important and what's not. Bring that to the stakeholders what the story is, so they have better education, more information, and they can make better educated decisions. So when I say to them, I have a P1 defect, we can't go live, all they hear is, we need to get that fixed and we need to test. So fix that fast, retest that fast, get this out the door. If I say, we have a P1 defect where when I'm using Notepad and I try to do save as, it corrupts the file I'm on and deletes all the files in that directory. They can go, maybe we still release, we take the save as functionality off. We tell people they just need to save it, and then they're gonna have to go in and rename it if they wanna change the name. Or they have to make a blank file somehow with a name and then go in and edit it. We can have workarounds. Maybe a workaround, and I've had a project where we couldn't get the online ticketing system to work. The project was $1 million a week. They hired a call center to take calls because the online ticketing system wouldn't work. If I would have just said, we have a P1 defect, they wouldn't know that they could put a manual workaround in place. Because maybe we go live with it the way it is now and do a fast fix in a month or two. Put a manual process in place, give the team time to fix that properly, test that properly, do another release. with information like this, with the story, people can make better decisions. So the whole point of this webinar today is to convince you to start trying to tell stories. Create reports that encourage discussion, whether those are reports like the one I showed today or reports that you have in another way that get that discussion happening. Get stories from the testers. They're the people there. I didn't write the story from Joe and Sally. They wrote their stories to tell me their story. Get those stories from the testers. Get those to your stakeholders. Encourage them to take interest on that. And in some ways I've done it in the past is with these reviews, you'll notice I left the numbers on the bottom and added the story to the top. That's how I encourage testers to start putting that story in, is to keep numbers they're familiar with, but start to add the dashboard in there. Start to socialize that idea with people so that they can start to see how this could go. Because you'll find you'll shift what your stakeholders are pushing for. They'll push for less fast, or they won't push as much to test faster and fix faster, because you're giving them better information around how can they help? Can they make a decision that lets the release go to the door with a manual workaround? And they don't know that when we just give the numbers. So we've only got a few minutes left. I want to save time for questions. I know I gave you a lot of information. So Paul, what have we got for questions so far?
Hey, so this was great, and I always like the way you approach things. This is neat. So we do have a couple of questions here. One is from Robin. She says, she or he, I don't know. Another way to look at this is to recognize the difficulty starts with inadequate or inappropriate requirements definition. What you're doing is essentially rewriting requirements in the form of tests. How about writing the requirements right in the first place so developers do the right things and testers can easily tell? That includes weighting requirements importance, so the differences reflected in the story format in your story format report would come out without duplicate extra efforts. So to summarize, Robin is saying, what about better requirements?
Yeah, I hear that a lot. What about better requirements? So if anyone on this webinar has kids and they go to grandma's house and say, Grandma, make me a peanut butter sandwich. And grandma puts peanut butter on bread and hands it to them and they go, this isn't what I want. The requirement was make a peanut butter sandwich. We should all know what that means. And this happened to my son. He went to my mom's house and said, Grandma, make me a peanut butter sandwich. And she phoned and she said, I keep making him a peanut butter sandwich and he says it's wrong. What am I not doing? I'm putting peanut butter on bread. I said, well, did you put bananas in it? Did you put grape jelly on it? Did you cut the crusts off? No, he didn't ask for that. Right. We aren't good at asking for what we want. And when we see something, we go, oh, no, that's not really what I meant. I meant this. And that's always the thing, right? Better requirements. It's tough to do. Sometimes our business doesn't know what they want. We want to see what there is. We don't even know what we want. My son knew he wanted a peanut butter sandwich. He thought he was very clear. In fact, he'd stomp his feet and throw a temper tantrum. But there was all this missing information. And Grandma would say, well, what's wrong with it? It's not a peanut butter sandwich. Our business can sometimes be like that. They don't know what to ask for. So I don't think that that's reasonable request. And I hear it a lot, right? Better requirements. We don't know what's implied, what's assumed, what their expectation is, how it might be different. We're bad at communicating, even with people we're closest to. Sometimes we say the wrong things. So it's hard to get that out of people. So that I don't think that's the answer, because I don't know how we would do that. People
That's
try.
great. Yeah, and if you really haven't lived until a stakeholder is stomped up and down on the ground for you.
And thrown a temper tantrum.
Yeah. So Douglas asks, do you have experience with management trying to use older metrics in agile environments and not happy with the results?
So I'm going to assume the stakeholders aren't happy with the results with older metrics to answer this one. Yes, so the big project, it wasn't agile, but we were definitely using traditional metrics. In fact, they had realized that running this multi-million-dollar project, they were counting test cases, and some test cases have more test steps than others. And this was a big aha for them. They went, oh my gosh, we can't count test cases because not all test cases are equal. Some have more steps, some take days while others take just a couple hours. they're not all equal. So we can't say if it takes you a day to run a test case that every test case you have will take a day. That's not reasonable. We can't weight them the same. Yeah, you can't. Hooray, I thought. So their solution was to count test steps, because some test cases have more and some have less. So instead of counting the cases, we will count steps. And I would report on, we ran 7,000 test steps today, 2,000 passed and 3,000 failed. It was painful. And that's how they decided to solve it, was let's get more granular. And they weren't happy with those results, because that's when I started to report that we had 90% pass and 1% fail. But the last test step was, did the whole thing work? So everything was failing. And I had tried before we got to the point where we were all panicked because we only had 4 weeks to release, socializing the low tech dashboard. And they all said, no, absolutely not. This isn't going to work. When we had that meeting and they all panicked and went, oh my gosh, we are reporting that we're good. It's actually really bad. We don't know the state of our project. I said, what if we took every area, because there were 15 different areas, and asked them, would you go live tomorrow? Yes or no? And if they go, no, absolutely not, tell me why. And we went around the room and did that. And basically, right, what does that look like? That looks like the low tech dashboard, which disappeared from my slides. How did that happen? There we go. Looks like the low tech dashboard. I'm asking them, test confidence, and they all said no. And I captured why not. And they said, well, this doesn't work and that doesn't work and this doesn't work. And that was our focus. We ran off the testing dashboard for the last 4 weeks. So if your stakeholders want using old metrics, they're not working and they're not happy, figure out what the problem is. Because if you bring this type of thing forward to solve a problem that they can't, you get a way better adoption. So think about, what are they saying about that's not working? Could you use this to give them the information they're looking for that they're not seeing, and say, hey, I think I have a way to give you what you're looking for. You're solving their problem. Hope that answered that.
That's great. Yeah, I have a question here that I really like from Tony. Tony says, my dilemma is the stakeholder wants a metric, but leaves it up to me to define. Do I throw things at the wall to see what sticks? I have more important things to do.
So Tony, that's, I tell stories, right? My whole presentation's on stories, and it's all stories about stories. I had a meeting, this same project, the big one. I was so rushed, I didn't have time to pull the metrics together because pulling together test steps took hours. So one meeting, I just grabbed last week's slides and put in random numbers based on, if I thought, like, I'll use last week's numbers and thought, I feel this is better, so I'll make it lower, and I'll feel this is worse, so I'll make it higher, because I just did not have time. And no one noticed that it was complete crap, because they weren't really paying that close attention. So if he wants you to give him numbers, but he's not telling you what he wants, I'd almost like to just kind of mess with that and say, and tell him, hey, I just attended this webinar and I saw this way of doing metrics. I know it's not numbers, but what do you think? Would this work for you? It's different. A lot of test teams are doing it, right? See if you can sell him on this. See if this works for him. If it doesn't, you can email me and say, hey, it didn't work. Can we talk about numbers? And we'll see, because I have some ways you can maybe ask him questions. But yeah, I would try this and see if he takes to it.
That's great. That's great. I have a bunch of people asking, does this work in Agile projects? I think you went through that a little bit, but do you have anything to add to that conversation?
Yeah, so what I've done on Agile projects before is, sometimes, depending on how your Agile project's broken down, the focus area could be your epic, and the sub-focus area could be the stories in that epic. Then you could talk about the test progress with each story. Sometimes if you're doing regression as well, you could have at the end, this could be regression at the end, and then you can say, okay, here's the areas of regression we're focusing on, here's how it's going. If you test sprints behind, like I know some teams will have different test teams and they test a sprint behind. This could be different sprints if you've got multiple sprints going on. With epics, you can have more than one sub-focus area, so then you could copy this whole column, sub-focus area 2, your stories, done it that way. Could be the key pieces of functionality you're delivering for a release. If story is too small and epic is too big, but you've got like sub functions under there, or features, maybe you could have it be features, epics features stories, or just epics features, whatever makes sense. And oftentimes I'll build it one way. my stakeholders will say, I like this, but can I see this as well? And there's another row or there's another column, right? It's always changing and in flux based on what people are saying. If we're done a certain area, I don't leave a bunch of stuff at the top that's all done. I start to delete them. And I often do it in PowerPoint because every week I'll just right click, duplicate slide, whoops, duplicate, not new. And this will be the next week. So I'll put a date, right? This was last week, this is the next week. And then I update it again. Then I can start to see the trend. How's it been going? Has the confidence been going higher in an area? Is it dropping in an area week over week? What does that look like? And what does that tell me? So
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Look, there are several other questions here or comments that are really interesting. I want to do one more before we close out here. So this is from Ben, and Ben asks, if no one asks for us to report on metrics, what do you think is the value of telling the tester story in this way? Have you had cases where this brought some value to the team or showed something to stakeholders that made things easier or better? So he's testing you.
I know. Yes, I have. And what's interesting is most of the time, and I'm going to make another assumption here because we can't really talk. Most of the time, the reason you're not being asked for metrics is because they really trust the team that they've got. If that test team is saying things are looking good, you've proven your worth and the company thinks, yeah, you guys are doing a great job. So great job, Ben. Your team's rocking it. What I would use this for is to draw attention to things that they're not hearing. And what I mean by that is I was on a project where we had a lot of trust. I did have the low-tech dashboard because I had a requirement to produce metrics, but no one was really looking at it. So sort of the same thing. They would take our word, but no one was really looking at the dashboard. And we couldn't make progress. So they would see the dashboard every week and it would say test progress blocked. And no one cared. Yeah, the team's blocked again, no big deal. And the team was starting to get frustrated because it was reasons we couldn't test. And they just kept saying, test faster. We didn't understand why you were blocked. So in cases where I don't have to report test metrics because no one cares, I like to report on problems I'm having. And the problem we had was that they thought we were doing lots of testing because I had a big team. We were blocked. So we started to track what each tester was doing every day. And I would get the testers to write down, I tried to test, I spent time in meetings, I spent time not being able to test because I'm blocked. And I started to report the number of hours and the cost, because every employee or contractor you can tie a cost to, whether it's a real number or not, how much time we were spending on not testing. Because leadership thought they were paying for a testing team that was doing testing, and they were actually paying for a testing team that was not doing testing. And when I started to show reports like that saying, we spent 200,000 today not testing, we spent 250,000 the next day not testing, they said, why are we spending all this money not testing? I'm paying for testers. And I said, you're right, you're paying for testers, but they can't test because the environment keeps going down and the code keeps getting moved wrong and we can't get into the system. Then they started to go, what the heck? I don't want to spend this much money not doing stuff. Who do I have to talk to so that I can spend money testing? So start to use reports like this to drive change. So if you're in a project and you want to see something different, and you can reach out to me because I've done it in a few funky ways like that example, on what can you show them that makes them wake up and go, oh my gosh, this is a problem, and work to fix it.
That's awesome. This has been so good. Thank you so much, Nancy. I appreciate it. You've done a great job.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. I'm going to switch over to and ask you to make me the presenter.
Okay.
And we'll figure out the rest of this. I think I have it here.
Oh, I think you got it.
So let's see if it shows that looks almost like the right screen. That looks a lot like the right screen. Great. Everyone, thank you so much for being here. Nancy, once again, thanks for being here. It was a really good presentation. I always enjoy hearing how you approach things and how it's different. And I really love the stuff where you're trying to get people's attention and you're coming up with clever and creative ways to do that.
Thanks. It's fun to try and do that.
Fun stuff, yeah. Cool. Well, let's figure out who's going to win. So who is going to win the Amazon gift card? Let's find out. And today, the winner is Ben O. So if your name is Ben and your last name starts with O, that's you. Congratulations, you've won the $50 Amazon gift card. I always appreciate people coming to these things. It's a busy time of the year and you've taken time out of your busy day to come here and join us. I hope it's been worth your while. Send me feedback, send me information about this. I would love to hear how you feel about this particular presentation, about any of the ones we've done recently. As a point of update, the recordings on the webinars page were not working until several days ago. They were down for a little while. So if you go, but they're up now. So if you go to beaufortfairmont.com/webinars, you should be able to get all the recordings of the 35 plus webinars we've done up to this point over the last 3 years or so. Lots of great information there. If you need help with your test automation, we're the people to call. Reach out to me. This is our office number. Reach out to me through email or by Twitter, and I'd love to talk to you about what's going on with your challenges and how we can help at Beaufort Fairmont. Once again, thank you so much for your time. Thanks again to Nancy, and everyone have a nice day, and I'll see you in the future in 2020. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.